Well guys, after over 3 months away, I am back to a brand new Victoria 2 tutorial. As I haven't done any lately because one, I haven't been focusing on because I was busy with other things at the time and I really couldn't think of what specifically to talk about next. And this one, I've been thinking about for a while. In this tutorial, I will explain what country, more particularly a great power, I think would be the best for you, a new player, to try out for your first game perhaps. Now in terms of what I think the first country you should play as to learn the game, the same country that I said before that I played, and that's Japan of course. Because they're almost a guarantee to be a great power as soon as you westernize, so you can learn how to westernize, learn how to get the tech need to build up your army, maybe get ballsy, maybe go take Korea, beat the crap out of China a little bit, but like I said, once you civilize, it's almost a guarantee you're going to be a great power. And then you can influence all of Asia and all that. So that's why I say they're the best country to learn. And since they're an island nation, they're very easy to defend against, even as uncivilized. Trust me, I know when I first played the game as a demo like 6 years ago, I went over the infamy limit multiple times because I didn't understand the infamy limit, and I regularly had like all the great powers attacking me, and I was able to usually defend them off pretty well because island nation. But, so Japan, like I said, is the best nation, I think, to learn how to play. But, what about the great powers? As stupid mouse come across, there are 8 great powers in the beginning of the game, as throughout the entire game too. And at the beginning of the game, it's America, UK, Spain, France, Prussia, Austria, Russia, and the Ottoman Empire. Now, who do I think are the best great powers for a new player to learn? Well, the worst ones, I'm going to start off with the worst. The 2 very worst ones you should avoid at all costs is Spain and the Ottoman Empire. Now, Spain, as I'm going to tag switch over to them. There we go over to Spain. They are one of the least populated great powers at the beginning. Just 4 million pops to work with. I mean, it's still okay. They can build a sizable army and all of that. Got some, they got some, navy. They got some colonies too. Remember, they got Cuba, Puerto Rico, some stuff in, Africa right here. So they can get into part of the scramble, the Philippines. So they got some really good colonies to use and still in position to do the scramble. But there's some big flaws with Spain. One, as you see right here, they have a rebellion at the very beginning part of the game, so you have to deal with it. Of course, let me go turn off Fog of War to make it easier to see, because you're not seeing the entire thing. There we go, you see, there's the entire rebellion. So, you're going to have to deal with them right off the bat, so that might not be necessarily the easiest thing for you. 2, their literacy is bad, as you can see, just 13%. And because of that, they're going to tech up really slowly. They have no industry, so you have to build that up, which is going to be very difficult. So, bad economy, bad population compared to everyone else, bad literacy, rebels. They're not a good great power to play as. And then for the Ottoman Empire, the Ottomans, as I go over to them. Now, for the Ottomans, they're more populated, which is good, like an extra million. But the problems I mentioned about Spain are a lot ways worse. They're one of the very few countries in the beginning of the game that are at war. Now, Tripoli, unlike the rebels, attacking on Tripoli is much easier, but you have to be careful because this is all desert. So, you're going to suffer severe attrition, so don't have like big troops going into Tripoli. If anything, if you want to be more careful, maybe mobilize and have your mobilized forces go in, because then they could just come back rebuilt afterwards without no trouble. But so they have the benefits though of Turkey, the Ottoman Empire. They could take over Tripoli pretty easily. They got all these free cores right here in Egypt. All these provinces right here are very easy to get. They can go to war with Egypt right off the bat, and you can get all of them usually within 2 to 3 wars if you're pretty good. And that would give you enough prestige to hopefully stay as a great power. And then of course you got all of down here too. Najd, Hijaz, Abu Dhabi, Oman, Yemen. they have no strength to them. You could easily kill them. So, playing as the Ottomans, you could take over Tripoli, cut Egypt in half, take over the Arabian Peninsula pretty easily and stay a great power. Now, the problems are they have worse literacy. I think they have the worst literacy of all the great powers, which means it's going to take a long time to tech up. And they have no industry, too. So, that's not very good. And that's why Spain and the Ottomans are the two great powers I would strongly recommend do not touch at all. Alright, then the next two I would also recommend don't touch, and that's Austria and Russia. Now, for Russia, as we go over, Russia is the second most populated of the great powers, but it's the most populated in Europe, and they are gigantic. They have a giant army, and they're spread out all over the place. They have dibs on pretty much Central Asia, Siberia. Maybe if you're lucky, you can get Alaska before America, unless you sell it off to them. Sakhalin, the Kuril Islands. So you have a whole bunch of areas to colonize. And of course, you could kill Central Asia. Khiva, Bukhara, Kokand. Maybe Afghanistan if you feel like. Persia influence them. Attack China, but China might be a little bit too ambitious right now for you to deal with because you get cores right here. So you got there's a whole bunch of advantages with Russia. Now, there's a lot of problems. One, despite their big army, their literacy is bad, so they're technologically backwards. So you gotta tech up really quickly. They have no industry because of their bad literacy. It's gonna take a long time to get that industry up. And since they're so massive, you got to do a lot of micromanaging, too. Because, I mean, look at all these provinces you have to work with. This is insane! And you gotta micromanage all of them. Can you imagine doing railroads, forts, naval base anywhere? That's a nightmare. Like I said, you're technologically backwards like Prussia, so if you're fighting like Prussia at the very beginning of the game, you have to be extremely careful because they will kill you if you're not careful, even though you're massively stronger in terms of like raw numbers. But another big problem with Russia, which I forgot to mention about the Ottomans too. Let's see, crises. Now, I might do a separate video on this too after this one, but to make it short as simple as possible, when crisis happens, you have a very good chance to be involved in a great war if you are involved in this problem. So, Russia deals with it really badly. The Ottomans deal with it really badly. But the country, as you see on the crisis map, that deals with the worst, who deals with the worst is Austria. And that's my next country I want to talk about, as to not recommend them for a new player to do a great power. Now, they are the fourth most populated country, great power, I'm pretty sure. They have army too, pretty good army. And their literacy, I mean, they have some industrialization. So, that's the good. The bad, they're technologically backwards. Not as bad as Spain, Ottomans, and Russia, but still not that good. You see, their literacy is kind of bad. They don't really have a navy either, as you see. Just 3 ships. So, they're not going to be able to really be a big naval power. Now, they could, maybe, if they want to take over, you could take over parts of Africa that can help out spread out your navy and get more colonies. Another big problem is, like I said, crises. Not only that, though. Not only do you have to worry about crisis, you're surrounded by enemies. You got a weak Ottoman Empire to your south, which eventually will probably go away because they usually get weaker. You got Prussia to your north, which could become Germany, because that's going to be involved, because Germany's going to want to, Prussia's going to want to fight you in order to help form Germany to get their core, get the spheres from the German states. Russia is a threat to you, especially since they're going to overwhelm you unless you're careful. And then you got Italy, possibly, if Italy forms down here, they have cores right here. Where is it? At Diplomatic Tech, I think. Right here, see? These right here, these are Italian cores, so if Italy ever forms, Italy's going to automatically have a possibility to attack you. So you have, and they're usually likely to ally with, like, Prussia or Germany if they form, so you're going to be surrounded by both ends from Prussia and Italy. So, not very good. And Crisis, too. As you saw, Crisis, a lot of them. So, honestly, of all the great powers, I think they honestly are probably the hardest because of all these factors. despite the problems with Spain, Ottomans, and Russia I mentioned earlier. Now, the next three countries, they're not like bad or weak, but they have their like own unique problems that I don't think a new player would want to deal with at the very beginning. First off would be America. As we go over to America, America is actually the least populated great power in the game. So that's not necessarily good. Now, the benefits are they are the only great power in North America. And also, not only that, in South America, too. The Americas. So, other than the British, Canada, because Canada, usually the British usually have some troops in Canada, but usually they go away. Other than them and Mexico and Brazil somewhat, America really does not have any threats on the continent. And since they're the only great power on the continent, they should be able to easily sphere all of the Americas. It's almost a guarantee that the Americas, America will usually have all of the Americas under control. They are a democratic country in the New World, which means they're going to get a massive bunch of immigrants, so that very least populated great power, that's going to change at the very end of the game, as they're going to be up there as one of the more populated ones. Easily. You can easily see them. Even just in the continental U.S. and Alaska and Hawaii, they could easily get into 100 million total pops. They're going to be gigantically populated. So they're going to become a massive power. And they are surrounded by an ocean. So unless like the British stay and fight in Canada, all the great powers in Europe, they're going to have to track across the Atlantic, which is a lot of attrition. So I don't know if it's not going to be easy to do a trip back and forth to send troops over. But then you got Asia too, and America is 100% safe from Asia at the very beginning of the game. Trust me, I know, because I've done all the times when I first started playing, I would play Japan to take over Hawaii to prevent America from colonizing out here. And the ships literally cannot live to Hawaii and then back. So it had to be a one-way trip for a long time. So unless you somehow got Hawaii, America is completely safe from Asia for a long time in the game. So that's the benefit. Now the problems with America. Like I said, those oceans are also a problem too. So if you want to invade, likewise, you're going to have to deal with those problems too. Two, they are still kind of weak too, though. You got to worry about that too. So, yeah, you're the biggest power on the continent, but if you're not careful, you could easily lose to the British, maybe Mexico, and Brazil, so you have to be very careful. Then, you're a democratic country. Now, that is still as just as good. It also has drawbacks, I mean to say. As in, you cannot change your political party. Under, like, for example, the UK, as I'll go back... Oh, I didn't do UK. I'll go over to UK really quickly. The UK, for example, they're in HM's government. You can actually change your political party even if they don't win the election. America, though, no. They're a democracy. You cannot change your government whatever they vote for, sir. You're going to have to deal with it unless you want to keep calling elections, do the national focuses to get the government that you want. You're screwed. So, but thankfully, America's political parties are actually not bad. They're actually pretty damn good. So it's not like too bad, but you're not going to have free control over it. And of course, your industry is going to be kind of suffering too, because they're not like state capitalism and all that, so you got to watch out for that as well. And of course, America has a bunch of conflicts they have to worry about too. Like they have to deal with Texas right off the bat, because Mexico's fighting Texas, so you very likely are going to have to get involved if you want to save Texas, which will later on help you if you annex them, so you can do the Manifest Destiny and take over all of the Americas right here, which would be really needed to cripple Spain. And then you got possibly the Civil War to deal with, so that's a bunch of problems. They're a pretty good great power, but with all those problems, I'm not sure if a new player would have a good time playing them. Then the next one on the list would be the UK. As we'll go over back to the UK really quickly. Now, they are the most populated of the great powers. In fact, they are the second most populated country in the game, only behind China. They are all over the place. They're the #1 army, pretty much, other than Russia and China, but due to all the tech, they're the biggest army in the world, the biggest navy. They're the most industrialized, the most prestigious. They're literally #1. And of course, they have colonies all over the place, like Canada, which they can colonize the rest of that. They got parts of the Caribbean, Guyana, what I think it was called. They got South Africa. They got parts of Africa here, so they get massively involved in the scramble. India, and they get events where they can take over a bunch of India, Australia, New Zealand. They have a whole bunch of areas to colonize. They are a really strong country. Now, the flaws with the UK. Those flaws, all being big and all over the place. One, being the #1 power in the world is kind of boring, because what's the fun of being the #1 power in the world? Wouldn't you want to play someone else and build them up to take over, overtake the British? So that's kind of a problem, but that's not necessarily a big deal. But them being all over the place is also an issue, because then you have to start moving troops all over the place, and there's a lot of micromanaging too, and I'm not sure a new player would do good with that. All that micromanaging, all that, but otherwise, they're really damn good, but I'm not sure all that micromanaging would be good for a new player. And then there's Prussia. Go over to Prussia. PRU, there we go. Russia, oh, my mistake. Prussia is the least populated country. I keep forgetting that. So Prussia's the least populated, but they have some industry. They have an army, and they have the tech too. They're very ahead in army tech. So even though, for example, Russia has a gargantuan army in comparison to Prussia, due to their tech advantage, Prussia easily can crush Russia in a war, one-on-one. Believe it or not, despite its massive population and army disadvantages. They are very strong, and they can form Germany and become a dominant continental country. Now, the problems with Prussia is it's mostly micromanaging again, and that's involving spheres in order to form Germany, because that's pretty difficult. I even had people complain on my tutorial on how to form Germany that they're having a tough time doing it. It's not easy. And you got enemies. You got France. You got Austria. You got Russia. You got a bunch of enemies you got to fight. You have to fight France, too, to take Alsace-Lorraine if you want to form Germany. And if you want to get the German states under your control, you're going to have to fight Denmark, well, that's not too bad. And you're most likely going to have to fight Austria, too, in order to get the sphere. So, you got a lot of countries, great powers you are going to have to require to fight if you want to form Germany, most likely. So, that's not really easy. Plus, the sphere and crap, I think that's going to be a massive hindrance to them. Plus, they don't have a navy either, just like Austria, a small navy. So, that could be a hindrance, too. So, that's my tier. Now, the final tier, and the last remaining great power, who I think would be the best country to play as the great power for a new player, and that's France. Now, why France, you might be asking? Well, let's see. They are, the 4th most populated country in great power. Austria just edged them out by a little bit. They have industry. They're the 2nd most industrialized country in the game. They have an army. They have a navy. They're pretty prestigious. They're like #2 in all the categories. They have some colonies. They got Algeria right here, so they can colonize parts of Africa. Right here, they got an event where they can colonize Madagascar. They can actually colonize these islands right here at the very beginning of the game, as you can see right here. You can actually get these right off the bat. There's an island out here you can get. There's, I can't remember what it's called, French Guiana right here. You got some islands in the Caribbean. You got this island off the coast of Canada. You have some colonies to work with. And you have a pretty good defensive area. You can easily build up France to be a #1 power. Now, the main problem that I see with France is mostly they're just surrounded by enemies. Spain, UK, Belgium, possibly the Netherlands, Prussia, and possibly Italy. Now, for Spain, they're a weak great power. In most games, they're going to fall out of great power. So, as the game goes on, they're not going to be a threat. And once they fall out of secondary power, you can actually sphere them and make them an ally, which would be very useful. If you're not going to attack Spain, you definitely want to have them as your ally. That would really help you out. Then, the British. The British are stronger, but if you remember my tutorial on how to beat them, you could easily just have troops right here, leave Dunkirk open, have your navy out here in the English Channel, but have them at port, have the British come in, because you can actually walk in from Dunkirk into Canterbury. You can actually walk over into the UK from France and vice versa. I think that's bullshit. Some mods actually don't allow that, but in vanilla, you can actually do that. And you can use that as an exploit. So what you do is you have the British come in, attack Dunkirk. You then send your navy in, as long as you're able to hold off any British navy yourself. They'll be cut off. They can't send reinforcements in. And then you go in, kill them in Dunkirk, retreat, bring your navy back, let them come back in, and rinse and repeat. And you can easily win a war just doing that strategy. Milk them, like I did in my tutorial showing that strategy. So you can actually beat the British very easily, despite the fact that they're stronger. Then there's Belgium. Now, Belgium, they're kind of a little bit of a nuisance like Spain is at the beginning of the game, but they usually are not too strong to worry about. The main problem, though, is you gotta worry about Prussia trying to sphere them. And if they sphere them, they can make them into an ally, so that could be a threat to you. So you want to try and keep make Belgium under your sphere. So do that in mind. And then you got the Netherlands to worry about. As long as they're not connected with Belgium, they're fine. But if they win the war against Belgium to annex them, then they're going to be a bigger Belgium, and that's a bigger concern, especially since they're usually still a secondary power, so they can be sphered by Prussia, and then you're going to have an even worse Belgium on your border. So you want to try and keep them under your sphere if you can, and hope to God that they do not have Belgium. Otherwise, you might have a tougher time. Then Prussia. Prussia is scary. They're probably the scariest of all the countries I'm talking about on this list. They have the potential to kill France, and if they want to form Germany, they are going to have to attack France in order to get Alsace-Lorraine. Now, to beat them, you're just going to have to play defensive pretty much. Just have troops in Alsace-Lorraine, let the Germans come in, and hope they die in the mountains. I mean, you could beat them. It's not too hard as long as you have the allies too. But once you are able to fight off them, you want to cripple Prussia as quickly as possible. Hope they don't form Germany. Like I said, as long as you keep Alsace-Lorraine, they can't form Germany. So keep that under your control as much as possible. And finally, although I mentioned Prussia as the biggest threat, honestly, this country down here is the bigger threat if they're done properly, and that's Italy. Now, as you see, Italy at the beginning of the game is not formed. In fact, France, along with Austria, are in the middle of a proxy war in terms of influence over the Italian peninsula. You see, France has the Papal States under control. Austria has a bunch of them down here. France has a very good relationship with Sardinia, Piedmont down there, and Two Sicilies is neutral pretty much. So, right now, France could have some good allies in the Italian peninsula. Now, if Italy forms, you could possibly have them as an ally, but I gotta warn you, if you did ally Italy, they can be strong, but they have cores in Austria here, and they're gonna want them back. So if you did ally them, expect Italy to call you into war with Austria. And Italy, although they could be good, the AI is usually not competent as Italy, so it's very likely that they'll call you into war when they're not ready either, so you could be a little bit of a trouble. So they could be a potential ally, they could be a potential enemy too. And if Italy was played right, they're actually more scary in my opinion than Prussia. Because I've played Italy so many times, and I fought wars against France, and I regularly just kill them, like in the mountains of Savoy, Nice, all of them. Like, I just have no trouble killing France as Italy. So if Italy's played right, which is very unlikely since they're an AI, but if they're played right, they can be the most scariest threat France has to deal with. But that's most likely not going to happen. Prussia's going to be your main threat. And that's my ranks of the great powers for a new player if you want to play them. I say France is the best option. Then the next tier would be the UK, Prussia, and America. They're good, but they have some problems with them that might be a little too much for a new player to handle. And then the worst country you should not play as is Austria and Russia. And at all costs, do not touch the Ottoman Empire and Spain until you're better with the game. Stick with France, Tier 1. Tier 2, Prussia, UK, America. Tier 3, bad, is Austria, Russia. And Tier 4, the bottom one, avoid the Ottoman Empire and Spain. So, and of course, like I said before, if you want the best country to play as is to learn the game, play Japan. But of the great powers, I say France is the best one. Alright, so I hope y'all enjoy this tutorial. See you guys next time for a couple more I gotta do now.